I call the meeting to order. The clerk has advised me that we are good to go. Welcome to meeting number 58 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Those appearing remotely will by Zoom, and those attending in person in the room. To ensure an orderly meeting, please direct all your questions or interventions through I, the chair, and wait until I recognize you by name. You have the choice of speaking in either official language of your choice. Those appearing remotely, there is translation at the on your surface. Those in the room, there's translation using the headphone. If there's an interruption in translation services, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it is being worked out. I would like to remind members that no screenshots or in-room shots are allowed while the committee is in hearings. Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Friday, February the 3rd, 2023. The committee will continue its study of Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada. I would like to inform all members that the witnesses appearing virtually today, which I don't think have completed the technical test, to check their connectivity. If anybody is appearing remotely, including members of the committee, and they are not using an approved headset of the House of Commons, they will not participate verbally in the meeting, but members will still have the right to vote in the meeting. I would like to welcome our witnesses, Madam Minister, Minister Gould, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Welcome back again. You're a regular before this committee, Minister. And Department of Employment and Social Development, we have Michelle Latimore, Director General of the Federal Secretariat, Sherry Redden, Director General, Indigenous Early Learning, Jill Henry, Director Policy, Indigenous Early Learning, Kelly Nares, Director Federal Secretariat, and Christian Paradis, Director, Federal Secretariat on Early Learning and Childcare. Minister, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee, for having me to speak to Bill C-35. As you mentioned, I've been here quite frequently recently, so it's always good to be back and spend time with my colleagues. Je suis heureuse d'être
I'm pleased to be accompanied today by the Director General of the Federal Secretariat on Early Learning and Childcare, Michelle Latimore, the Director General of the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Secretariat, Sherry Redden, as well as Directors Jill Henry, Kelly Nares, and Christian Paradis.
Territories and Indigenous partners, the Government of Canada is transforming the way childcare is delivered. As has been said many times, childcare is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Parents should have the opportunity to build both a family and a career, and children deserve the best possible start in life.
As part of Budget 2021, the Government of Canada made a transformative investment to help give them that start, up to $30 billion over 5 years to build a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. Since that announcement, we have signed agreements with each province and territory to reduce fees everywhere outside of Quebec, support the creation of high-quality childcare spaces, and ensure early childhood educators are better supported.
Canada-wide system is already benefiting tens of thousands of families. Fees for regulated childcare have been reduced in all jurisdictions outside of Quebec and the Yukon, which already had affordable childcare systems. It is a critical step toward our goal to see average $10 a day childcare across Canada by March 2026.
To ensure the success of the system, we are working hard with provinces and territories to create 250,000 new full-time regulated and primarily not-for-profit childcare spaces by the end of March 2026, as well as to attract, train and retain the best early childhood educators.
Le projet de loi C-35.
We have put Bill 35 before the House to ensure future generations of families across Canada can continue benefiting from this system.
It reinforces the government's commitment to support provinces, territories, and Indigenous partners in building a Canada-wide system. It would ensure that federal funding will be sustained, promises accountability, and further underscores our commitment to human rights conventions, including the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Bill C-35 is the result of comprehensive feedback from our partners and stakeholders. It is driven by shared interest, close partnerships, and collaboration. This proposed legislation respects provincial and territorial jurisdiction and the vision and principles of both the 2017 Multilateral Early Learning and Childcare Framework developed with provinces and territories, as well as the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework that was co-developed with Indigenous partners. Le projet de loi
With Bill C-35, provinces, territories, and Indigenous partners would benefit from the assurance of a sustained federal commitment to early learning and childcare. By enshrining our shared principles and vision into federal law, we would be building stability and predictability into the childcare system.
Our childcare system is working everywhere in Canada, and more families are benefiting. This bill has been conceived to ensure that, if passed as written, families continue to benefit from these investments for generations to come. And now we are pleased to answer your questions. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Minister. We will now open the floor to questions, beginning with Madame Ferrari for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. We know how important child care is for parents across this country, and in particular, access to child care for all families. So we heard from Michelle Lattimore this past week that the framework sets a foundation for a shared long-term vision for early learning and childcare, guided by the agreed upon principles of quality, accessibility, affordability, flexibility, and inclusivity. However, when I asked Ms. Lattimore about the wait lists in Canada, there had been no data collected to know that number. So it is odd to have a framework to solve a problem without knowing the numbers to start with. Also, MP Falk went on to ask that what the consultation, when she asked about consultation, Ms. Lattimore had said that we were seeking a response on the legislation and the discussion guide outlining what we expect to see in the legislation. She said, we have specific responses on challenges that are being faced by rural or remote families in accessing childcare have not been specifically addressed. So the report does not break down what we heard from the perspective of not-for-profit or for-profit providers. So if the federal government, Minister, has no purview under the licensing and agrees that there is a place for all forms of childcare, that is up to the individual provinces to decide. Why is there a specific call out in the guiding principles, yet the contradiction that you're only primarily focusing on not-for-profit and public? If the goal is quality, accessibility, flexibility, and inclusivity, why leave out a sector in the vision of childcare that provides care for so many kids across this country?
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. I think it's important to clarify that so long as they're a licensed provider, they're included in the child care agreement signed with provinces and territories. It doesn't distinguish between existing for-profit or not-for-profit providers. And in fact, the not-for-profit umbrella includes home care, which could be private or not-for-profit. So in fact, no one is actually left out in the system. And when it comes to wait lists, most provinces and territories don't have a good understanding, because part of the challenge is because it has been an ad hoc system for so long, parents, and as a parent myself, I did this, you put your name on multiple wait lists, seeing where you're going to be able to get a spot. And I've heard from countless people across the country who have done the same thing, and daycares and centers who say they don't have a good, accurate sense, because they might have 60 or 100 families on their wait list, but half of those could be on other wait lists as well. But we know that there is a demand and there is a need, both in urban, rural, remote communities. All of that is contemplated within the multilateral frameworks. And in fact, I was in Saskatchewan just on Monday, where the government of Saskatchewan, since signing the agreement, has announced 4,000 new spaces, many of which are in rural and remote communities.
Thank you for that, Minister. And I appreciate what you're saying. It's just not adding up. If the focus is for all, why wouldn't you have that in the language of the bill? Why do you say primarily not-for-profit and public? Why not just say all childcare? Why is that language so exclusive?
Well, I think you're going to be hearing from Pierre Fortin after me, who has done exceptional research on childcare, particularly on Quebec and in the CPE, the Centre Petite Enfance. And he has some pretty extraordinary research that demonstrates just how significant the quality gap is with regards to for-profit and not-for-profit providers. We also recognize that as this is being funded through public dollars, we want to ensure that any investment that we're making is going directly back into childcare provision. And there is considerable research that demonstrates that there is higher quality usually within the not-for-profit system. Doesn't mean there aren't excellent for-profit providers, and that's why we've grandfathered all existing licensed spaces into the agreement. Of course, it's an opt-in decision within each province or territory, but we've seen incredible take-up across the country, between 95 and 98%, depending on the province or territory, of all licensed providers, irrespective of the type of childcare that they are providing.
Thank you, Minister. You said in your opening, point of order. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I had an echo there. You said in your opening remarks that childcare, access to childcare is a necessity, and you said families have the right to build a family. And I guess what I would ask you in listening to hundreds, thousands actually, because there's Facebook groups of thousands of families who can't access childcare right now. And one woman who wrote to me, and she has been on a wait list since she was 7 weeks pregnant. Her child is now 14 months old. And she says there is no mother's right to access, and she has given up on having any more children. And your words in your opening remarks that said that parents should have the right to build a family. What do you say to people like Leanne who say that this agreement does not give parents choice? It gives all the control to the operators, and that she has chosen not to build a family because of this agreement?
Well, I would say that that's exactly why these agreements are in place, because until we had these agreements, there often wasn't choice, because it was either too expensive or there wasn't a space available. As I said in my last answer to you, we know that space creation is really important. It's why we've contemplated building 250,000 additional spaces across the country, so that we can make sure that people like Leanne and families who want to have children, but maybe they can't because of affordability or because they don't have access to reliable childcare, are going to have that. This agreement changes the nature of how childcare is delivered in this country in a way that is going to have transformational impacts on families, on women, and on the economy. And we don't have to look far. We can look at the experience of Quebec that 25 years ago brought in universal, affordable,
Do you know the current
childcare
wait list in Quebec to access childcare?
Gone over. Now, Mr. Coteau for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I know that for decades now, governments, provincially and federally, have been looking for ways to strengthen childcare, and the dream of a universal childcare program has been something that many Canadians have aspired to. And the fact that we're here at this point, to me, it's just incredible. I know in my community of Don Valley East and throughout the Don Mills corridor, this is a very popular program, and I'm happy that we're at this stage. Can you talk a little bit about the economic benefits of such a program to families, but also to people who are involved in the sector, who work in the sector?
With pleasure. Childcare is one of those amazing policies that is both smart social and economic policy. In fact, if you look at the Quebec experience, they have received more in increased revenue from income taxes than they spend on the actual program. And so the return on investment for the broader society is astonishing. And part of that is because it means that parents with young children, predominantly women, can stay or re-enter the workforce. Quebec has one of the highest rates of women with children under the age of 4 that are working. And that has long-term impacts, financial benefits, both to the woman who has financial autonomy and sovereignty over her finances and doesn't have that gap of a number of years where she's not earning, if that's her choice, as well as for the family where there can be a greater income when, at a time when you're kind of spending the most when you have a small child. For every dollar invested in childcare, we see $1.50 to $2.80 return to the broader economy. And the estimates are that if, when this childcare program is fully implemented within the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to see billions of dollars returned to the economy and an increase, I think is it a 2% increase to GDP, right? It's huge. This is such a smart investment that we can be making that has such positive benefits, not just economically, but also socially.
I know that the bill calls for the creation of the National Advisory Council. It says that there would be between 10 to 18 members within that council, and it would strive to find some diversity and balance. Can you talk a little bit about how you're going to approach this and what's in work so far, and when can we expect that council to be in full operation?
So the council is in full operation.
Okay.
It was announced in December, or November actually, I think. In November, and we have members from all across Canada, almost every province, almost every territory, and a range of perspectives, both academic and researcher, but also those that are providers and educators, as well as parents. And then we've also tried to strive to make sure that there's a diversity within there, regionally, but background. There are parents with children with special needs as well, official language minority communities, to really get a good perspective from across the country. Of course, when you have 12 to 18 members on a council, you can't have every single voice represented, but I think we've done a fairly good job of making sure that we have that diversity, and I've had the occasion to meet with them twice, and I have to say it's a pretty phenomenal group of individuals who care so passionately about making childcare successful in this country.
I know that a significant part of the investment is going to Indigenous communities. I think it's just under $2 billion over 5 years, if memory serves me correct. One of the goals of C35 is to really put in place a long-term strategy for funding. Can you explain how the mechanics of that would work? Once we actually, if the bill does go forward and C35 is at a place where it's in full operation, how would you envision that long-term funding being structured?
So C35 is complementary to the multilateral framework and bilateral agreements that we have through the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Initiative. So we've signed 13 bilateral agreements with provinces and territories, one asymmetrical with Quebec, because Quebec is much further ahead in this regard than the rest of the country. In fact, they're the pioneers in Canada of this. And so it's complementary. So we've signed these agreements on 5-year terms so that we can make sure that we are setting out objectives, and provinces and territories can respond with action plans determining how and illustrating how they are going to spend that money. And then what C35 does is it commits the federal government to being a long-term funding partner. I don't think it's appropriate for C35 to determine what the amount of money is, because I think we need to continue to have this to be an evergreen process. But I think what's really important is that it says the federal government is committed to funding childcare, and we are going to be there for the long term. This is in addition to the Budget 2021 decision, which provided ongoing funding post the 5-year agreements of up to $9 billion a year in perpetuity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Coteau. Madame Beyroubé, pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes, Madam. Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Madam Minister, and welcome to the other witnesses here with us today. You've told us, Minister, that in Quebec we're leaders in the area of childcare. C303 that was presented in 2006 by the NDP is to some extent the ancestor of C35, only a few differences, but there is one of the differences that is of concern to me. In C35, there is no mention of exempting Quebec. We know that Quebec is one of the leaders in matters of early childcare. 25 years ago, Quebec brought in a family policy that has allowed us to develop early learning and childcare at a low cost in excellent conditions, allowing for work-family reconciliation. Based on that, do you think it would be wise to include in C35 a specific provision ensuring that Quebec is fully opting out of this program with full compensation to avoid future negotiations and disagreements between the levels of government every 5 years? Thank you, Ms. Bérubé, and welcome to the committee, of course. I can tell you that we have an excellent relationship with the government of Quebec in this agreement. As you know, it's an asymmetric agreement with the province of Quebec. This concern is not something we've heard from the government of Quebec. We haven't had disagreements in negotiating the bilateral agreement, and I certainly hope we won't have any in the future. The government of Quebec and the governments of other provinces and territories appreciate the fact that this legislation is truly focusing on the role of the federal government in this matter. We are not stepping into provincial or territorial areas of jurisdiction. It's important to ensure that we don't. That's not our area of business. But the most important clause for the provinces and territories is the guarantee of federal commitment ongoing, a commitment to fund this program into the future, which will also ensure that there won't be any conflict at the term of the current agreement. Why does Section 4 in the other document that I mentioned, why wasn't it used in this Bill 35 to ensure that explicitly Quebec has been withdrawn? This is specifically about the government at the federal level and to ensure that we all understand the federal commitment to remain a funder of this program. Before Budget 2021, there was no long-term commitment to early learning and childcare at the federal level. We did have agreements with provinces and territories. For example, in 2017, my colleague, Minister Duclos, negotiated with all provinces and territories a framework on their early learning and childcare. But it was really here to focus on the federal government and the federal commitment in this regard. At the last meeting, it was said that this bill, yes, specifically affects the federal involvement. And yes, Quebec is not specifically withdrawn. It's a 5-year agreement. What guarantees that during the next round of obligations, Quebec will not see something imposed on it? The framework, or rather the bill, is really to ensure that the federal commitment is longstanding, to ensure that a future government, if it's not a Liberal one, though I certainly hope that it will be a Liberal government, should it be negotiating with provinces and territories, would be held to these principles and this vision during those future conversations. Of course, the government of Quebec and the governments of the other provinces and the territories, are already respected in bilateral agreements, and Quebec is a leader in this matter. As we have said, what we're hoping for the rest of the country, what we're trying to do, is ensure that the rest of the country is able to work at the same level as Quebec does, which is a leader. Quebec has also undertaken to create 30,000 new spaces thanks to this new agreement. So we will continue to work in a very positive fashion with the province of Quebec. And I can say, as my prior minister in his work with Quebec said it was excellent to be able to lean on Quebec's experience and so that the rest of Canada can learn from that. So, all right, Bill C-35 and all the provinces, Quebec, given that it already has an early childhood programming, we are leaders in this, and our priority is to work with our children. So the compensation for Quebec will be generous, I hope. Yes, it is based on a formula which is the number of children under 12 years of age in any province or territory. And based on that, we have decided on the amount for each province and territory, and that holds for Quebec as well. Quebec, of course, launched this programming 25 years ago when the federal level of government was playing no role in this matter. And we have based many of our aims, our vision, our principles on the Quebec experience, hoping that this will inform the work in other provinces and territories. Thank you, Ms. Bérubé.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Nice to see you, Minister. So I know the Department of Justice is working on a co-developed process for free, prior, and informed consent, and that C-35 includes a commitment to furthering UNDRIP. This was indicated by Madame Redden in the last meeting. But we know this response is inadequate because we know there cannot be one single definition for free, prior, and informed consent, and rather, as in the case, it is law and facts and circumstances that determine how it's applied. This would also be true for Bill C-35. So will the minister acknowledge this and take the appropriate measures to enshrine the rights of Indigenous peoples to make decision over matters impacting our own children? And I share this because this is the very foundation of reconciliation, especially in light of the findings of the TRC, which was based on the testimony of residential school survivors who were robbed from their families. And this government has been stalling on enshrining FPIC. We're coming up to the 2-year mark. You have a month and a half left. This is part of the law, 2 years to develop a plan. Nothing on the table yet. This isn't acceptable. We have an opportunity here to do the right thing. So again, I'm wondering, Minister, if you'll acknowledge this and take the appropriate measures to enshrine FPIC, ensuring the rights of Indigenous peoples to have full, free, prior, and informed consent over matters impacting our children.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kazan, for being here and for the intervention. And, I think we certainly share the same objective. And I think it's really important to see C-35 as a complementary tool to the multilateral framework that we have that was the co-developed framework on Indigenous early learning and childcare. And one of the things that we have been very careful not to do is to have C35 go beyond the bounds of the co-developed framework that we did with Indigenous early learning and childcare that was announced in 2018 and endorsed by the AFN, ITK, and the MNC at the time. And one of the things that I've noted very clearly in the travels that I've done in the past year around the country and made specific note to visit with Indigenous communities and Indigenous leaders who are advancing IELCC is that this is distinctions-based, it is Indigenous-led, it is culturally relevant, and incorporates language learning as well. And it's very much Indigenous-led, right? It's very much something that is, we are a funding partner. We've co-developed this, but we need to see this as a partnership.
Just as a matter of time, I think that's all positive. Going back to Bill C-15, however, all future legislation is supposed to be in line with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, so I would push back on that. Just moving on to wages and working conditions, I think everybody knows I was a former early childhood educator, very proud. And we know that the average wage for an early childhood educator is $19.50 an hour. It's not livable in most places. Unions representing childcare workers support adding an explicit, clear commitment to decent work to Bill C-35. We know that in order to make this work, we need a robust workforce. And we also know that research, study after study, indicates that poor pay and working conditions are a deterrent to joining the sector. And that's exactly why I left actually my job as an ECE, because I didn't want to live on the no salary that we were provided for the important work we do. Is your government resistant to adding language that establishes livable wages and fair working conditions as a guiding principle for federal funding? I say this because your government came out in a platform in 2021. Your party was saying it was vowing to push for a $25 minimum wage for personal support workers. I support that. Care work is critical work. Are you willing to support the same sort of livable wage for early childhood educators?
Well, I absolutely support a livable wage for early childhood educators and have been in a lot of discussions with provincial and territorial counterparts on this. And I would say that this legislation, as I mentioned, is about the federal role. Wages are the purview when it comes to childcare of provinces and territories. However, the multilateral frameworks and the legislation highlight quality. And obviously, we can't have quality if we don't have a talented, caring, well-compensated workforce. And so each of the agreements require that provinces and territories put forward plans to recruit and retain ECEs. And we've seen over the past year, many provinces and territories put wage top-ups in place. Often they're not as much as is needed, but I can say that for all of my provincial and territorial counterparts, this is the number one thing that they are working on this year. And for the National Advisory Council, that's the first piece of work that they're doing as well.
Just to push back, you did do that for personal care workers federally. But anyway, just pushing back.
Thank you. Ms. Kazan, a short question.
Okay. We know that study after study has found that public and not-profit care delivers high-quality services. Your bilateral agreement with Alberta, you created to committing 42,500 not-for-profit care spaces. I support that, but then in January 31st, 2023, instead you funded 22,500 for-profit spaces. Why did your government, after tabling a bill putting not-for-profit public care spaces a priority, why did your government not instead fund 22,500 spaces, not-for-profit and public?
So they're cumulative. Alberta is still required to create 42,500 not-for-profit spaces, of which they've created about 7,000 so far. The 22,500 in the private sector was something that was held back until Alberta came forward with a cost control framework, because we wanted to ensure that any public funding that was going to for-profit providers was going to be well spent and well managed. Of course, it's public dollars at the end of the day. And this is similar to New Brunswick and PEI, who have very robust public oversight and don't necessarily distinguish between not-for-profit and for-profit providers. And so in order for Alberta to pursue that, they had to provide a similar kind of assurance to the federal government.
Madame Gray for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. Minister, you've referenced building 250,000 new spaces. That's correct. I heard that correct. So how many new childcare workers would be required to accommodate this?
About 40,000.
Mm-hmm. So Stats Canada reports that the greatest percentage of children in childcare are prior to school age. And if we use the average of 6 children per childcare worker, as it's less for infants and it's more for school-age children, and 6 is the number where mostly you need 6 kids per worker, that would mean 41,000 new childcare workers, as you have said. And so, if we continue on doing that math, if we look at all of these spaces and look at an average childcare facility of about 75 children, which is quite large, that would mean 3,338 new childcare facilities would have to be constructed in order to accommodate these 250,000 new children in the system, and that's within 3 years. So the information, the document that we had from your department said within 3 years. So what is the plan to open more than 3,000 childcare facilities at very large amounts of 75 children per facility over the next 3 years?
Sure. So on our website, actually, each province and territory has submitted an action plan. It's all public information, which details their plan for opening new spaces. About 50,000 have been opened or announced in the last year, which I think puts us in a good position. And remember, that's in the first year of this, and we look to ramp up. So provinces and territories are working hard on this, and they're doing a great job. They have plans to make sure that they're getting to areas where childcare is underserved. This is freshest in my mind, but I was in Regina on Monday, and their YMCA there partnered with Co-op and the government of Saskatchewan, and they increased from 80 to 170 spaces in the past couple of months. They got a new space. So there's lots of really great work happening around the country.
But a lot of that information is more on the not-for-profit, and it's not doesn't include the for-profit. And when we actually look at reports that have been done by Stats Canada, that the number of locations are about a third of the for-profit, which are quite often in-home locations.
Those are included in the not-for-profit
mm-hmm.
category. So if you're a home daycare, we've included in the not-for-profit category. So there's lots of opportunities to expand in home daycare as well.
Right. So when we also look at the workers that are needed for that, reports are showing that over 60% of workers will need to, within the next 10 years, need replacement workers. So when we look at the labor force of that many new workers that you had said around 40,000, plus the number of replacement workers, for the replacement workers over the next 10 years, it represents about 181,000 workers that will have to be replaced. So once you add the two of them up, you're looking at well over 200,000 workers. So
we're up for the challenge.
What's the plan for that?
We're up for the challenge, right?
Okay.
This is a nation-building endeavor, right? This is a really exciting thing that's happening across the country. Provinces and territories are increasing seats at colleges for ECEs. The College of the North Atlantic, for example, in Newfoundland, Sask Polytechnic in Saskatchewan. They are putting together strategies, and again, All of this information is public on the Government of Canada's website. Everyone can look up the action plans. They can look up the bilateral agreements. They have to put in place retention plans as well. Manitoba has done a great job in terms of putting forward a benefits and pension plan. They've got more work to do, but they're working on it. BC has done some really great work in making sure that, or in doing a new program for high school students so that they can actually graduate an accredited ECE and not have to go to college. So there's lots of really interesting, innovative things happening around the country. And whether it's the National Advisory Council on Early Learning and Childcare or the upcoming FPT meeting, workforce is going to be the main topic that we are discussing because it's fundamental to making the system a success.
So a lot of those strategies, so the timelines that we're looking at, what happens if those timelines aren't met? I mean, you're looking at a 3-year timeline to build thousands of new facilities. Of course, we know that even getting a building permit in a lot of municipalities can sometimes take many months or many years. You're looking at having people go through the programs. I mean, do the numbers really add up? Do the numbers really match
yes.
up? And they do match
they do.
up.
Yes, and we're going,
okay.
right? And I have to say that, regardless of political stripe at provincial and territorial levels, everyone is committed and engaged in this endeavor, and they are excited about it, and they're working hard, and there are great public servants across this country who are thinking about these challenges. And then there are amazing childcare providers and ECEs who are, just so excited about this and are thinking about how they can expand their services. So I have to say that it's ambitious, yes. It's a challenge, absolutely, but there are a lot of folks who are really engaged in making it a reality.
Mr. Long for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to my colleagues and the Minister and everybody else. Thank you for being here. Quick story. 100 years ago when our kids were very young, my wife Denise and I can remember it very well. We sat down and had to make a decision of whether we could afford or she could afford to go to work or stay home. I mean, the costs even then were so significant. And I remember we were there with the calculator and, 2 kids and this much, and you make this much, but your mileage and all this thing. So, we made a conscious decision that Denise stayed home for many years to look after the kids because we couldn't afford daycare. And obviously all of us have constituents that come in and tell us those same stories. I mean, costs now, we're anywhere from, $15,000 to $30,000 per year for families. That's after-tax dollars. That is just significant. And, again, as I said last meeting, we're all here to do great things for our constituents and our country, but this program is truly transformational. And I just thought if you could just kind of comment on how significant it is for families, number one, and what an economic opportunity it's going to be to bring so many parents, in particular women, back into the workforce and what that's going to do for our economy.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, the stories that I get to hear from people across the country are just amazing, right? It's life-changing for so many people. I've had, people come up to me to say, I've decided to have a second kid because of this, right? Like it's like, that's how much more meaningful do you get? I heard from a family who was able to keep their home because of this, because they had a variable rate mortgage, and the reduction in childcare fees meant that they could afford the difference. Like they were actually having to decide between that, and this has changed their life. I had a woman in Nova Scotia say to me that because of the childcare fee reductions, when she goes to the grocery store, she doesn't decide if she can buy chicken or not, right? Like it's so meaningful. And then I've had in every province or territory that I visited, every time I go, I meet with a mom, and I'm sure there's dads too, I just haven't talked to them yet, but a mom who says, I am going back to work because of this, because I can now afford to go back to work. And it's, I know there are people who say, well, women shouldn't have to make that choice, but it's not a choice if you can't afford it. Right. And it's the empowerment and the ability to have that financial security is so important, and it's so meaningful. And I have to say, like, it's just been incredible. You know, if women in the rest of Canada rejoin the workforce at the same rates that Quebec women did 25 years ago, that's 240,000 additional people working in our country.
It's substantial, that number. And just kind of following along with that, I remember when it was announced, and obviously, you know, I'm in New Brunswick and St. John Rossay, and our provincial government is a Conservative government, Premier Higgs, and it was the Minister Carty at that point, I believe. And I remember kind of looking at our province and across the country saying, well, you know, there's probably going to be a lot of provinces that won't sign on, and it's going to be a challenge. And, you know, to your credit and to the department's credit, one by one, they signed up. And, you know, I wouldn't use, you know, I say begrudgingly, but they know it's a good program. You know, whether it was Premier Kenny or Moe or Higgs, they know it's a good program. And I just wondered, you know, obviously you went across the country, you did these deals, you negotiated these deals. Can you just share your experiences, like how that went? And, you know, like obviously you probably had some challenges more than others, but can you just kind of share with us that, how that rolled out across the country?
How long do we have? But 30 seconds? Okay, it went great. So, no, but you know what? I think one of the things that became increasingly clear was the unbelievable economic benefits that provinces and territories would receive, both in returned revenues to government coffers because of increased taxes and spending, but also just the impact of the pandemic and the She Session, and the fact that so many women had been out of the workforce because of the pandemic, and now returning was so important. There's a labor shortage in this country. There's a housing shortage, and you know, one of the things that I think convinced a few governments is that these are workers who are already here, who already have housing as well. But most importantly, I think, like, the economics don't lie, right? Like, this is really smart economic and social policy, and it's hard to argue with those facts when you have them in front of you.
Thank you.
Madame Bérubé pour...
Ms. Bérubé, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Madam Minister, in what way does the agreement with Quebec differ from those with other provinces, territories, or Indigenous communities with regard to early learning and childcare? As you know, it's an asymmetric agreement. It is based on the number of children under the age of 12 in each province or territory, about $6 million over the next 5 years, being transferred to Quebec without any specific requirements, no strings attached. You mentioned in the bill that the First Nations have helped draw up their own early learning and childcare programming. Who was consulted, how many groups, and how many often? You mean for the bill or for the Indigenous early learning and childcare programming and agreement? I'll pass that over to Sherry.
Is it for the early learning and childcare?
Indigenous early learning and childcare, which
the framework?
Indigenous groups for the law.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were very interested in hearing from Indigenous governments, organizations, and representatives on Bill C-35. There was formal outreach undertaken to over 50 governments, organizations, and stakeholders early last year, as well as promotion through some of the existing partnerships to solicit feedback and interest around the proposed legislation.
So how did you spread the budget, including Indigenous communities in Quebec and across Canada? Yes, of course. With the Indigenous early learning and childcare framework, we provide the funding by group on distinction-based approach, Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis. Also, two self-governed nations with some level of independence, and this decision was made to allow each area to make their own decisions by region. The federal government is not specifically in charge of this. The regional governments carry out the distribution. So you distributed 30 billion over 5 years for Indigenous communities. Yes, the 30 billion is for all of them. Yes, the Indigenous, Inuit, Métis, and provinces and territories. Oh, all right. So how are the communities reacting to this funding? Of course, the provinces will be overseeing this budget, but do you have any follow-up on the reactions of Indigenous communities? There are two frameworks, one with the provinces and territories and another with the Indigenous communities. Provinces and territories decide how they use the funding based on an action plan that they send in to us every 2 years. As for the Indigenous communities, it's a little more autonomous as an approach, but there are nevertheless some principles holding up the initiative that were co-developed with Indigenous communities. I can tell you about my most recent experience in Manitoba with the Métis Federation. That was just 2 weeks ago. They have already opened 12 early learning and childcare centres, and they are planning another 4. That's 200 more spaces in Manitoba already. I was in Saint Eustache, a Métis community, and I was able to visit their new early learning childhood centre, about 40 spaces there. And half of those spaces are specifically for their community. They're doing excellent work, including language learning, cultural learning. It's really education that's grounded in their own Indigenous traditions. Thank you, Ms. Bérubé.
For 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. The Poverty Reduction Act establishes a national advisory council, very much like we have in Bill C-35. But unlike C-35, the National Advisory Council that's being used in the Poverty Reduction Act is required to submit a report to the minister on the progress being made in terms of poverty reduction. The minister is required to table the report in Parliament. Clause 16 in the bill does not include indicators to measure quality, accessibility, affordability, inclusion. In the minister's report, the sector has raised concerns about how to ensure accountability by the government. So what's your plan for accountability, and are you willing to amend it so that it's more similar to the Poverty Reduction Act?
Well, in this legislation, we have put forward that it will be the minister doing the annual reporting to Parliament. Of course, provinces and territories have to report to us on an annual basis with regards to their progress and challenges that they have, and we need to do that. But it's really about the minister reporting. The advisory council from the National Advisory Council on ELCC is really to report to the minister, and then the minister will report to Parliament and to the public.
So are you willing to amend it, however, so that it's consistent with requests coming from the sector in terms of accountability measures? Because although I know that's in the bill, that's not what's coming from the sector in terms of what they're asking for to ensure accountability. Are you willing to support the sector and their requests for greater accountability?
Could I perhaps just ask why it would be preferable for the advisory council to report as opposed to the minister?
Well, what we've heard from the sector is that's exactly what they're supporting, something similar to the Poverty Reduction Act. So we've seen this in action. The sector is asking for the bill to be amended to mirror something similar. Would you, as the minister, are you willing to explore that further in terms of making amendments to support greater accountability?
Well, I mean, accountability is always important, which is why, we have so many measures in place through the framework and through the legislation. It's not actually something that I personally have heard asked for by the sector. So if you have any written submissions, I'd be willing to look at them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Madame Ferrari, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I think there is no doubt at all that the welfare of the child should be at the epicenter of this conversation. And our best investment we can ever make is our children, because when we have mentally healthy children, psychologically and physically safe, children who feel psychologically and physically safe, we get mentally healthy adults. So without a doubt, this is such a huge, huge topic. And you've said in your national framework, quality, accessibility, affordability, flexibility, inclusivity. These are the pillars for which you are fighting for, which I completely concur with. And so I would ask you, Minister, would you be open to amending the bill as it is currently written under Section 7A to say all? We know that the provinces set the standards and not the federal government for childcare. So to facilitate access to all early learning and childcare programs and services, would you be willing to amend it to that so that we are not excluding over half, according to Stats Canada, over half of all childcare in Canada is unlicensed and home-based childcare? Would you be willing to amend it to add the word all?
Ms. Ferrari, it's very important for us that this remain with licensed childcare. I would,
but as I just said, Minister,
I think you're misconstruing. I think you're misconstruing many different
so you will not. Here. So you will
Ms.
not.
Ferry, can we just explain the difference? Because I think you're conflating a bunch of different things here that is not necessarily correct. Provinces and territories also only fund licensed childcare. They don't usually fund unlicensed childcare because it's unlicensed. Home care, so long as it's licensed, is included in this. As I explained to Ms. Gray earlier, we include it under the not-for-profit umbrella. And in fact, all licensed childcare, whether it's for, I know, but I think it's really important that you understand.
But it's really important that this is also my time, Minister, to get as much answers for the people. But it's also important you understand, so you're not sharing this information. It's also important that you understand that all home care needs to be included, because you're not saying, you're doing the opposite. If you're saying quality, accessibility, affordability, flexibility, and inclusivity, why wouldn't you put the word all? Why are you not open to amending that?
Ms. Ferrari, I think it's important that we just take a step back so that everyone can understand what we're talking about. We're talking about licensed spaces, which is important. Provinces and territories determined the licensing requirements, but I think it's important
that many home-based childcares are licensed.
But they are included. So I've said this like 4 times already.
And I've said this like 7. So in particular, those that are provided by public and not-for-profit, and you are not getting it either. Why? I am representing the thousands of people writing to me, Minister. I'm here. I want
licensed
access.
Home care is included.
Then why do you have it written in the bill repeatedly that says primarily not-for-profit and public, when you could just say all licensed? Why wouldn't you just say all licensed?
Ferrari,
why not change the language?
We have in the definition of not-for-profit childcare that we have in the multilateral frameworks, which is compatible and complementary to the legislation, licensed home care is included under the not-for-profit umbrella. So what you're saying is actually there, not unlicensed home care, but there are many provinces and territories that are doing a lot of work with unlicensed home care to bring them into the licensed system, because if we're providing public dollars, we want to ensure that childcare providers are meeting those high standards, that quality, those safety requirements, which I'm sure as a parent yourself, you also want to do. And you began talking about the welfare of children. So that's extraordinarily important.
It is extraordinarily important, and we'll move on, because to me, what you're saying and what you're doing are not the same, because you're saying inclusivity and then your wording says the opposite. So we will have to agree to disagree.
But that's just not
I hope we
true.
can find it. It is true. So I'm going to move on, Ms. Minister.
But we can provide you the information so that you have it clearly
at the table. Ms. Minister, you said you can't have every voice represented at the table, and your national council, you've said this, you said it today in your testimony, you can't have every voice represented. However, you do not have one single voice on national council that represents home-based childcare. I want to read you a letter that was sent to me and to you, and I want to know what you want to say on the record about it.
Madame Ferrari, your time has gone by. I'll give a short time to the minister to respond if there was something there. Then we're going to conclude.
Thank you, Mr.
Collins.
Chair. I think it's just really important because what Ms. Ferrari was saying was actually inaccurate, and I'd be happy to table with the committee so that everyone is clear on this. Of course, unlicensed childcare is not included for clear reasons. However, licensed home care is part of the not-for-profit umbrella, and they are included in this, and that has always been the case. And so I think it's really important that we're speaking from a factual basis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Now to Mr. Collins to conclude with 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I want to commend you, Minister, much like my colleagues have, past and present, in terms of the Herculean task that you had getting these agreements signed across the country. And, you know, for someone who's been in politics a long time, it is not often to see different parties of all stripes support legislation unanimously. And so you have that across the country. We don't have that here. We know the opposition's feelings on this, but I agree with Ms. Ferrari in terms of some of the comments where she talked about the principles and how good this legislation is. I know she voted against it, but I think it's
point of order, Mr. Speaker. I did not vote against this bill.
Sorry. I would say I apologize for that if I mistook that. I would say that. You know, when we see parties come together from across the country, we know we've done something right, and we see that, I think, with the Canada Disability Benefit as well. This committee had the opportunity to talk to Canadians and work with the minister in terms of historic legislation, and I would put this in that category as well. You know, there is some fear, though, from the sector that at some point in time in the future that a government will rip these agreements up. And that's coming from service providers. That's coming from those people today who are receiving the service and the reduced fees and all the benefits that come with it. And so I would just say that, you know, can you give some assurance to the committee and to those watching as to how this legislation is protected on a go-forward basis? Because we've seen political theater in the past. We went through that in the last election. If these agreements are signed, they're going to be ripped up. And so I guess I would look to you for some assurance in terms of how do we assure Canadians that that this is here for the long haul?
Well, the best assurance is not to elect a Conservative government because we saw Stephen Harper rip the child care agreements up in 2006, and Mr. Poilievre has called this a slush fund for parents. So, you know, that's probably the most secure way. However, what I think is important about this legislation is it's trying to safeguard as much as possible from a future likely Conservative government that doesn't necessarily believe in child care. However, I also believe that once this is established, it's hard to take it away, right? Provinces and territories are going to rely on support from the federal government. That was part of the agreements that we signed, knowing that we would be bringing forward this legislation. I think any future government would then have to justify to Canadians. They'd have to change the law. They'd have to tell Canadian families that their childcare fees are going up because they don't believe in supporting them. So I think this is one additional safeguard that Canadian families, childcare providers, and provinces and territories have to ensure that the federal government is there for the long haul.
And thank you for that. And there's a review process in terms of ensuring this is a fluid process. There will be check-in points. There'll be opportunities for provincial and future federal governments to look at how these agreements are working. Can you elaborate on that process in terms of if things need to be tweaked, there's a process to ensure that that happens?
Yes. So, I mean, the legislation is there for the long term. It commits the federal government long term. It outlines the principles and the guiding factors and the spirit of what these child care agreements are. Then there's the complementary multilateral framework that sets out the agreements on a 5-year basis. And I think one of the reasons why it's important to do it on a 5-year basis is we're building something new. We have not done this before in Canada. This is a new partnership with provinces and territories, and we need to be able to have an ongoing dialogue with PTs, an ongoing dialogue with Indigenous partners to make sure that we get this right. And, you know, that's something that I think is really exciting. We feel the excitement across the country. It's making a difference in people's lives every day.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
Thank you. I just want to correct the record because I think with being here and having this, there was some confusion, and I would just want to say on the record that to the minister, she was correct. I think there was some overlap, and I just want to say I didn't mean to include unlicensed. What I was asking for an amendment, and I think there was some back and forth. So I just want to correct the record of she is correct. But what I was asking for the amendment was to add all small female licensed. I never meant to include unlicensed. That wasn't what I was trying to say, but just that if we would be open to amending that small female licensed private operators.
Thank you, Madame Ferrari. That is
Thank you, Minister.
More debate, but we'll allow you to clear the record. Mr. Collins, you had about 20 seconds. Are you concluded?
Well, 20 seconds isn't a lot of time. I just want to say thank you again, Minister. I mean, you've done tremendous work on this file. We appreciate it. I think politicians and elected reps of all political stripes appreciate it across this country, and you've just done tremendous work.
Mr. Collins, thank you, Minister, for appearing, and at times a lively discussion back and forth. And to the witness that appeared with you, we conclude the first hour. We'll suspend for a few minutes while the next witnesses are admitted to the committee meeting. Thank you, Minister, again, and staff. We'll suspend for 3 minutes. Will resume its study of Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada. To assist the interpreters in their work, I kindly remind all members and witnesses appearing today to introduce themselves when speaking and to speak slowly. You may use the official language of your choice. If there is an interruption in interpretation services, please get my attention. We'll suspend while they are being corrected. Please direct your questions and responses through myself, the chair, and wait until I recognize you. We will begin this last hour with three witnesses. Monsieur Pierre Fortin, Emeritus Professor of Economics. Crystal Churcher, Chair of the Association of Alberta Childcare Entrepreneurs. And Dr. Sophie Mathieu, Senior Program Specialist of Vanier Institute of the Family. We will begin with Mr. Fortin for 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes, please, sir.
Chairman, Emeritus Professor just means that I'm old, so don't worry about the title. I will begin in French, but then switch in English. I'm very enchanted and mostly honored to have had this invitation from you. Donc,
My presentation will focus on Quebec's experience over the last 25 years. As we look to quickly build out a Canada-wide childcare system, it is wise for us to understand and learn from Quebec's successes and challenges since 1997. This can inform our work going forward.
Educational Child Care Act of 1996 set two explicit objectives. One, help families improve their work-life balance, and two, enhance child development with a strong emphasis on equality of opportunity. After 25 years, there are two broad outcomes. First, work-life balance has made huge progress. Second, child development and equality of opportunity have been enhanced, but are still very much a work in progress. Quebec parents initially had access to childcare spaces at a low universal daily fee of $5, which has been adjusted upward to $8.85 currently. Since 2009, a private full-fee for-profit sector has been allowed to develop competitively with the low-fee nonprofit sector by giving parents access to a generous provincial refundable tax credit on childcare expenses. I would emphasize 8 takeaways from this 25-year experiment. First, childcare utilization has expanded in the province to around 300,000 spaces from 79,000 in 1997. The childcare system has remained hugely popular ever since 1997, over 90%. Second, system costs have been under control. The total cost in 2022 is some $3.1 billion, somewhat less than the current OECD median of 0.6% of GDP. Third, the labor force participation of Quebec women has risen to the highest level worldwide, on par with Sweden. In 2022, 88% of Quebec women aged 25 to 54 were in the labor force, compared to 84% in other provinces and 76% in the United States. Fourth, women's economic security and lifetime wages have increased significantly. The male-female hourly wage gap in Quebec has been cut by half in the last 20 years, going down from 17% to 9%. Women can now pursue continuous instead of staggered careers caught in a string of job separations, promotion delays, and wage stagnation after every new birth. Fifth, our best estimate is that Quebec's GDP is likely 1.5%, or currently $8 billion higher than it would be without the childcare system. Sixth, the larger labor force and broad economic activity allow the childcare program to more than pay for itself. It has not required any increase in taxes. The fiscal surpluses can be reinvested to expand public services or to reduce taxes at choice. Seven, the unanimous finding of the psychomedical literature is that the quality of childcare and its favorable impact on child development are highest in the low-fee, non-profit early childhood centers, les Centres de la Petite Enfance, or CPE, and lowest in the private full-fee for-profit centers. There is no way to escape the conclusion that private markets for childcare have unfortunately been a quality failure. I'm saying unfortunately because I've defended private market solution throughout my career, but a fact is a fact. It therefore appears very clear to most, including many private for-profit providers, that the way for the province to go about this from now on is to raise quality levels by all means and everywhere up to CPE standards. Last, eighth, but not least, access of disadvantaged children to good quality care is lagging and should be a top priority for policy. I'm concluding that the Quebec system has not been following a Robin Hood type targeted approach, but the Scandinavian tradition of universality. The new federal transfers to provinces for childcare are also conditioned on generalizing the Scandinavian approach to all of Canada. The Quebec evidence compellingly suggests that this is the way to go. There are three main lessons to draw. One, the economic well-being of women has been greatly enhanced. Two, there has been no need to increase taxes. And three, the obvious challenges now are, one, to get rid of the remaining shortages of spaces. Two, to increase quality everywhere up to CPE standards. And three, to attract more disadvantaged children into the high-quality sector. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur Fortin.
Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
Madame Churcher, for five minutes, please.
Good morning. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share with this committee this morning. My name is Crystal Churcher. I am a private childcare operator in Alberta. I am also the chair of the Alberta Association of Childcare Entrepreneurs, which is a nonprofit industry association that represents the interests of private childcare operators in Alberta who currently make up 70% of our childcare delivery. What we have heard around Bill C-35 and the Canada-wide Early Learning Childcare Program is all very high-level information with very lofty intentions. I want to provide some of the on-the-ground, real-life experiences that operators and families are facing. This program and legislation are all about the long term and entrench the federal government's vision for early learning and childcare. It is critical that we move forward with an aligned way that respects the rights of children to quality, flexible childcare, and choice for parents. The goal of this bill is for all families to have access to high quality, affordable, inclusive childcare. However, what we are seeing on the ground is the human toll and the impact around the rollout of this program. The bill was introduced without adequate consultation with all industry stakeholders and without respecting how the childcare sector has evolved in provincial jurisdictions across the country. What we're seeing is a program that has been created has created a demand without the infrastructure to support it, which is causing wait lists, a two-tiered system, and undue stress to families and operators. Women entrepreneurs are facing bankruptcy and closure of businesses that have now lost all their value. The system is frankly not equitably accessible and is failing to meet the promises to parents and families. Operators are asking, what is the real cost of meeting this $10 a day goal? Parents are losing choice, quality of programming is at risk, educators are burned out, and women are losing their businesses. Bill C-35 does not sufficiently recognize that Canada's current childcare system still very much depends upon thousands of private operators, despite directional preference for the nonprofit business model. When subsidies go to childcare spaces rather than directly to parents, it becomes a form of soft coercion. This doesn't create options that respect the difference of families or provide them with a form of childcare they choose. Decreased fees, also only available at specific centers, are actually eliminating parental choice and provide a forced standardized system. By limiting access to only programs that are predominantly nonprofit, this program is forcing families to surrender their choice in childcare. While this program advocates for the full economic potential of women, our sector is made up of largely female entrepreneurs like myself, and we are seeing the expropriation of our businesses. We are all wanting to see women succeed, but what about the women who are investing in creating childcare spaces in their communities? By wanting to provide affordable childcare to families we serve and opting into this program, we have had an expansion freeze placed on our private businesses, lost the ability to control the fees for our services, and ultimately lost the value of our investments. The truth is that the promised childcare spaces are not actually available to all families. In Alberta, what we're seeing is urban cities with wait lists of 75 to 150 families on average, and rural areas like Grand Prairie having wait lists of 600 or more families. This legislation promises access to childcare regardless of where families live, but that's not the reality. Parents are facing less access because the program has created a demand that can't be met, resulting in wait lists. When a guiding intent to prioritize nonprofit childcare spaces, private expansion has been halted, yet demand for private programs continues to grow. Increased demand for childcare has forced private programs to expand to meet need, despite having no access to grants for parents. This is resulting in parents paying upwards of $50 or more per day for the same program in the same center. In Alberta, we are seeing a two-tiered system. Do we really have affordable childcare if we can't access it? The CWELC program does not create equitable access to childcare, especially for lower income parents that were promised support to go back into the workforce. Parents and operators alike cannot understand how the CWELC affordability grant funding is providing to every family, regardless of income bracket, when operators currently witness the majority of those on wait lists fall into low income brackets. Right now, families of varying income levels benefit, not necessarily prioritizing those who need affordability the most. In closing, I urge the committee to take an approach to meet the Government of Canada's goals to make Canada childcare more affordable to families. I leave you with 5 solutions. To provide funding directly to families, to change funding to an income-based model or a sliding scale so that true equitable need and accessibility can be met. Focus legislation around the concept of parental choice regardless of business model, and instead have the funding follow the child. Open the full expansion of childcare to private operators to meet the demand for childcare, and respect and allow free market competition as a way to ensure quality and innovative niche programming that meets the needs for all parents. We have a duty to Canadian families and children to make sure that we create a program that truly represents the needs of families, protects the quality of care for children, and provides real accessibility to all families. We can't continue to ignore the issues that we're seeing across the country and move ahead with a well-intended but flawed program. I'd like to just share a few stories from operators this morning. I had one childcare operator reach out to me.
Ms. Church, if you
Sorry,
could just...
am I out of time?
Well, we're over, but because the first one was over, I'll give you the
Okay,
flexibility.
just one story.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I have one childcare operator in a rural, underserviced area of Alberta who has proudly operated a high-quality daycare center for 17 years. She has invested in creating 194 childcare spaces for her community. When asked how she felt when the CWELC program was announced, she said that she was excited for families to finally have access to more affordable childcare and optimistic that it would bring relief to families sitting on wait lists. Yesterday, she sent a letter to all of her 194 families in her center, plus 563 families on her wait list, to notify them that she was closing her center. After 17 years of successful operation, the viability of her business is gone. With high inflation, fee caps, and expansion restrictions on private centers, her center is financially handicapped. She has had to make the heartbreaking decision to close a business that she built because she can't take the financial risk of signing a new lease or investing further into expanding her center with the unknown of cost control framework looming. She writes that she is worried that the $10 a day goal will be at the cost of quality care for children. These are the decisions facing operators on the ground right now, deciding to walk away from something they have proudly created because they can no longer carry the financial burden or because they simply can't agree with the reduced quality of care to bring the costs down. Thank you so much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Churcher. Dr. Mathieu, for 5 minutes.
Merci.
Please.
Thank you. My name is Sophie Mathieu. I have a PhD in sociology. My specialty is family policy in Quebec. I work at the Vanier Institute of the Family as a senior program specialist, and I'm a member of the National Advisory Council on Early Learning and Childcare. However, my comments here today do not reflect the position of that National Advisory Council. I'll be picking up on some of the observations shared by Mr. Fortin. As you may know, Quebec established a network of low-cost childcare centres at the turn of the millennium.
There's a bit of an issue with the quality of the interpretation. Could we just, if you could just slow down, Doctor,
slow down?
Please, yes.
Slow down the pace.
Yes, okay.
Yes, very well, I shall. I will try to speak more slowly. I was saying that Quebec has had 25 years of navigating successes and challenges with this initiative, its low-cost childcare centre network. The relevance of affordable childcare is no longer a matter of debate in Canada, at least in Quebec. Now the network is dealing in Quebec with other well-known issues. These include a lack of spaces, the quality of care, and challenges in recruiting and retaining staff. These issues are well documented, so today I'd like to discuss 3 lesser-known lessons that we have learned in Quebec. Lesson number 1. Not all childcare is daycare. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said in the 2020 Economic Statement that just as Saskatchewan led the way in Canada on healthcare, Quebec can lead Canada on daycare. She saw Quebec as a model for establishing a national childcare service. However, in its original form, the Quebec model is not predicated on daycares, but on, as Mr. Fortin pointed out, on what we call early childhood centres, the Centres de la Petite Enfance, or CPEs. Daycare and CPE aren't synonymous. They do not refer to the same type of childcare service. By definition, at least in Quebec, a daycare is a private business structured to make a profit. Daycares are not drivers of the Quebec model. I digress briefly here to mention that there are daycares in Quebec, 2 types of daycare, those that offer subsidized spaces for the same $10 price as CPE spaces, and unsubsidized daycares that offer spaces at market prices well over $10 a day. All CPEs, on the other hand, operate based on the social economy model. They are nonprofit corporations. In this important sense, then, a Quebec CPE cannot be a daycare centre. The differences go beyond semantics and ideology in Quebec. As Mr. Fortin pointed out, generally speaking, Quebec daycares offer lower quality services than CPEs. Albeit overall, Quebec is still in no position to say that it offers high-quality services to the majority of children. Indeed, in the early 2000s, a study showed that only 27% of all childcare settings offered services of good to excellent quality. For CPEs taken alone, that figure rises to 35%. For commercial daycares taken alone, it falls to 14%. Lesson number 2. Even when the majority of spaces are available at low cost, less affluent families have less access to quality daycare. Here again, Mr. Fortin touched on this. In Quebec, 36% of children aged 4 or less do not attend a regulated childcare centre. Little is known about these children or the systemic, economic, or cultural barriers that impede families' access to childcare. The Quebec Auditor General's report to the National Assembly for the year 2020-2021 does offer some insights into disparities in access to childcare, disparities between affluent and less affluent families in Montreal. For example, in the neighbourhoods of Parc Extension and Saint-Michel and in the borough of Montréal-Nord, all more disadvantaged areas, the number of spaces offered in daycares is higher than in the CPEs. However, in Westmount, a notably wealthy neighbourhood of Montreal, more of the available spaces are in CPEs. In simple terms, then, the poor have access to lower quality services in daycares. The wealthy have access to higher quality services in CPEs. Lesson 3, that's the last one. The positive effect of childcare on the labour participation of Quebec mothers must be seen in context. The federal government has largely justified the implementation of a childcare system as supporting women's participation in the labour market, and they're right on that, again drawing on the Quebec's experience. That childcare affects women's labour force participation is undeniable. I myself am the mother of 3 children, and I wouldn't have been able to continue my PhD studies and undertake a career had I not been able to use low-care daycare services. But it's important to keep in mind that Quebec has a comprehensive family policy that goes beyond the provision of low-cost childcare. Quebec brought in its Parental Benefits Program in 2006, the Quebec Parental Insurance Plan, the QPIP. It is more accessible and offers more generous benefits than any such program elsewhere in Canada. The high labour force participation of Quebec mothers stems from this institutional context that offers more than a childcare service. Even though, of course, the childcare services are essential. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Any comment you have in answers to questions?
Yes, of course. Let me conclude to say that I will be happy to answer your questions in either official language, and that if you'd like to see the text or touch on the issues that I've been mentioning, please visit my website at sophiemathieu.ca.
Submit your, I believe it may be here, your written text to the committee for full consideration, as well as cover any material in the answers to questions, which I'm sure you'll get. We'll now begin with Madame Ferrari for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses here. Great testimony to help us ensure that we are putting forth the best possible solutions for the welfare of our children. Crystal, if I may, can I call you Crystal? I want to touch on something that we've heard from the minister repeatedly, and I know, if you're watching the exchange prior to this, I was really trying to push to have the language of the bill change to include sort of these independent owned businesses, licensed home daycares. But the minister has said that the licensed private are included. She's pretty adamant about that in the bill. How do you reconcile that? If they're included, why is there such suffering in your industry of these women entrepreneur home-based childcares?
I think there's a little bit of confusion about just some of the language. So my understanding is home-based daycares, what we call them in Alberta as day homes. Those are being included under this agreement as non-for-profit, as a nonprofit model, which is very confusing and misleading to me because those are very much a for-profit model. They are women that usually stay at home and are allowed to have a certain number of children in your home, and you want to be licensed. I 100% support licensed, regulated quality care. That is separate from, say, what my center offers. I am a private childcare operator. I have a commercial space that I lease. I operate under the exact same regulations and standards as a nonprofit business model. We follow all the same guidelines. The only thing different is our business model. But it is two separate things. And I do believe that a home-based day home would be a for-profit business model as well. I find it very misleading to be included into a nonprofit structure. But yeah, we as for-profit private childcare centers, we are not able to expand and do not have access for our families in our care the same way that a nonprofit business model does under this agreement. So I wholeheartedly think that if you are supporting family accessibility to childcare spaces and you want to, help alleviate some of the wait list and demand that we're seeing, that it should include all licensed childcare providers.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. I think that sets the record straight in terms of, changing that language to include that all licensed, right? Mm-hmm. Which aligns with the pillars of ensuring that. I'm going to come back to you if I have time, Crystal, but I would like to go to, if I may, is it Dr. Mathieu or Sophie? What would you like to be called?
Sophie.
Thank you.
Sophie's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Just what can we learn, or what would you like to see changed in the bill, if there are any changes that you have recommendations to strengthen it to ensure, Quebec has set a standard and we do have the data, which I think is wonderful, right? We can kind of look into the future and say, hey, this is what happened in Quebec. Also, it gives us a great opportunity to sort of tighten up where unintended consequences or gaps happen in the system for accessing quality licensed childcare. Is there anything you would like to see worded differently in the bill that would ensure access and inclusivity?
Of course, but there are things in Quebec that haven't been resolved after 25 years. And one thing is that access to childcare is not a right, and not even in Quebec. And it doesn't seem to be a right in the bill either. So if we want to really be serious about childcare, we need to think about the fact that we would never tell a parent that their child cannot access grade 1 because there is not enough space in their elementary school. So it's something that hasn't been accomplished in Quebec yet, but that's something that we dream of for Quebec and obviously for the other provinces to have access to childcare as being a right. Only if it becomes a right, then we can make sure that it's inclusive and that we can work on other issues like quality and other issues that you have identified.
Thank you for that. That's an interesting feedback from what you guys have seen. And I guess my follow-up question, how do you ensure access if the gap to access is closed off? So we've heard from Crystal where they're meeting the demand, right? There's a massive wait list. There's just massive demand. As I said earlier before when I was interviewing the minister, I have mothers, fathers phoning me saying, I'm not going to have any more children. We can't have any more children. We can't afford it, and we don't have any childcare. And in principle, I understand this bill of what it wants to accomplish, but I feel like it's falling short on how it's going to do that. Do you have a specific recommendation, Sophie, on how to improve access? I know you said a right. Is there anything else tangible we could put into the legislation?
That's a very difficult one. So I would have to come back to you. That's something that I've been thinking about. Maybe Pierre has more ideas, but that's something.
I see he has his hand up, yes. And I don't know how much time I have. So Pierre, if you want to jump in there.
Monsieur.
Yes. OK, merci.
Thank you. Something that's really important here is to clearly understand that in our system here in Quebec, we have fully understood that the private daycares were competing not based on quality necessarily, but on price. That's one of the factors. $40 a day, for example, per child. To keep that, you have to cut on a number of things, and in general, what is cut is quality. It's quality that's kind of swept under the rug, if I can put it that way. I don't see any daycares offering parents, look, we will charge you $50 rather than $40, and thus we will be able to provide you with better quality. Parents generally would say, too bad, we'll just go somewhere else that's still charging us only $40 a day. The problem with daycare is that it's not like a tangible object, a good like, frozen Brussels sprouts or like a vehicle. And the consequences on quality are seen only long term. Thus, it's difficult to reconcile the private model with this. And if you'll allow me just to finish on this, it might be possible to keep the private daycares within the system, but only on the condition that there would be a strict quality requirement made of them and imposed by authorities, and that be followed up on very tightly. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
We're well over.
Favorise le CPA.
Mr. Van Bynen for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Growing up in a family of 15, I think child care in our household would have made a huge difference in the livelihood of our family. So I'm quite pleased to see that we are moving forward in this important social support programs that strengthens families and gives women an opportunity to go forward. I'd like to explore the Quebec experience with Mr. Fortin just a little further. Clause 7(1)(a) of the bill proposes the guiding principles for the federal investments to aim and to facilitate access to early learning and child care program services, in particular those that are provided by public and not-for-profit daycare providers, which continues on the discussion we're having now. And you've mentioned earlier that one of your concerns is that there is a shortage of spaces. So do you feel that this is the correct approach? And in your opinion, will targeting the support primarily for public and not-for-profit providers provide enough child care spaces to meet the current and the future demand?
Oui.
Yes. At the end, or at the turn of the century, there was a real lack of spaces, and that was a persistent problem in the Quebec system. That's why the government got involved, to ensure more competition with what Ms. Mathieu, Dr. Mathieu, was mentioning earlier, private daycares, and that developed quite well. A number of private daycares were created, but the analysis carried out by experts on quality, based on a number of well-recognized international criteria, was that only a small minority of the private daycares were truly offering good to excellent quality services. And that's why we realized that the private daycares were certainly competing amongst each other based on price, but not necessarily on quality. And to include them in the system, we would have to be able to impose quality levels that had already been developed and were well recognized to exist in the early childhood centers, the Quebec CPEs. It was very difficult to do this, though, to oversee them. And there are many owners of daycare centers in Quebec that are now asking to be shifted changed into early childhood centers, CPEs.
I want to pursue, and that is with Dr. Matthew. I note that you're on the National Council. My question is, what were your successes and what are your challenges? And I see that under Section 14, your mandate is to provide advice to the minister and to conduct engagement activities. And I'd heard earlier that someone made the statement that there was not sufficient consultation. So could you talk to me about your successes relative to consultation and engagement and some of the challenges going forward?
OK, donc.
All right, sure. I can't today speak as a representative of the National Advisory Council on ELCC. That is clear. I'm not speaking in that capacity here today. I can say that I'm not fully in agreement with what has been said. There's a high level of representation when you consider the people who are on the National Advisory Council. There are people from Quebec, people representing Indigenous communities, people representing early childhood educators. Many of them, I don't want to speak to our work so far, but when it comes to the makeup of the council, I think it truly is very representative. There's a high level of expertise, people with a high level of education, people who have extreme understanding and experience in the field, and Indigenous people.
To Mr. Fortin, this time, with my banking background, what we need to recognize is some goals that are measurable, achievable, realistic, and that we have a reasonable timetable in those things. So based on your experience in Quebec, what would be reasonable goals that should be set out so that we can see that the program is successful?
1 minute.
Mon expérience est
I too have experience in the field. I spent 19 years working in what were learning and child centers of the time, and my spouse started such a center at Radio-Canada, at CBC in Montreal. She was one of the leaders in that regard. So our great success in Quebec is due to the fact that we have developed this early childhood center system, the CPE system, which ensures that a certain number of criteria are respected, and that also brings in, that really obliges private early childhood centers to have on their boards of directors a certain number of parents. So these parents are directly involved in their neighborhoods, and they are very important to
Time.
The time has ran out.
Yeah. Could I ask you to submit?
And we've only got one round, and so I will move to Madame Beyroubet pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes, madam. Please. Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the witnesses with us here today. My question is directed to Mr. Fortin. You have said that there are 5 main lessons to learn from Quebec, Quebec being a model in this area, one of the leaders. What are the missing elements, then? Important elements that we would need to add to Bill C-35 to ensure our success outside of Quebec? I can't really see any, actually. Not necessarily essential, but I do think that picking up on what Ms. Ferrari has recommended, we might clarify that private daycares might be admitted into the system, but only in as much as national and international quality standards be imposed on them and be respected by them, adopted by them fully, just as in the nonprofit centers. So that's something that could be specified in the bill. Another comment, if I may, the word Indigenous comes up 31 times in a 5-page bill. I think that's important. It's an important community, of course, set of communities. I have colleagues at UBC and within the federal department who have Donna Fair, for example, who have shown that the Quebec system in northern Quebec, in the Inuit communities of Quebec, are such that the rate of economic activity carried out by women in those communities is really considerably higher than in other such communities across Canada. So that's really part of the success. It's very important to ensure that this approach be used throughout all Indigenous communities. My next question is for Ms. Mathieu. Thank you for clarifying the difference between daycares and early childhood centres, the CPEs. The data about Indigenous communities that the government is working with are outdated. So how can we be sure that Bill C-35 is responding to the real needs of Indigenous people, Inuit people, and the Métis? That's quite a big question. Given that I'm not a member of any such community, I really don't feel that I'm able to comment on that. I think you'd have to ask them that question rather than asking a white woman who has no link to any such community. So I'm really not able to answer. Very well. My question then goes to Mr. Fortin and to Ms. Mathieu, perhaps. Who should be sitting on the National Advisory Council on ELCC? Ms. Mathieu, go ahead. Who should be sitting on it? Because the National Advisory Council has already been created. It's already working. I think that the right persons have been chosen to sit on it. If you'd like to see the list, it is available online. I'm not sure if that's a helpful answer. But yes, the council has been created and we have begun our work. Thank you. Do you think that the bill will be living up to expectations both for rural regions and for urban regions? I'm not sure. Mr. Fortin, perhaps you have a take on that? Some comment to share? I'm not an expert on the differences between rural and urban sectors, only that in the rural sectors, rural areas, it's possible that the distance between where people live and where an early childhood centre or other ELCC would be available might be greater. So it might be useful to look more to in-home daycare centres with special training for the early childhood educators offering services in homes to ensure that they're fully aware of the levels of quality that must be respected. And they would be able to charge the $8.55 that is charged per day in Quebec or the $10 charged elsewhere, in as much as quality would be respected. Clearly, rural areas, let's say in the Gaspésie area or in the lower St. Lawrence area or the North Shore of the St. Lawrence in Quebec, you know, are very different than what we see in Montreal or Quebec City. As well, 7.1a of the bill established a directive to the effect that public nonprofit service providers would be included in as much as they respect the standards set by provinces or by Indigenous groups. Do you think this is the right way to go? What I like in that wording is the specification that any early learning childcare service would have to respect the provincial standards, the quality standards more particularly, It has been clearly shown that if the quality is better, children develop better, and the effects on their development are long-term. It's really important, the first 3 years of life. We all agree on that, because the brain is not finished developing at birth. It continues to develop considerably over the first 3 years of birth. And when you miss that very special development window, they remain vulnerable for the remainder of their lives. It's very difficult to correct that later. It costs a lot. Thank you. And Mr. Fortin, Ms. Bérubé as well, and Mr. Kazan.
Thank you so much, Chair. My first very brief question is for Madame Churcher. I know there's been some concerns raised about not enough support for for-profit care, but as you're aware, January 31st, the federal government actually allocated 22,500 spaces for for-profit care providers in Alberta. Did you lobby any federal ministers, government caucus, or opposition MPs prior to this announcement being made? And if so, who did you lobby?
We absolutely did lobby all levels, I would say, provincial, federal. We have spoken with Michelle Ferreri multiple times on this. We have, had our members and our board write letters right directly to Minister Gould. I don't know who we couldn't, who we may have missed. The 22,500 spaces was an amazing win for private operators in Alberta. Definitely very grateful to have those spaces, but they do come with a contingency of opting into a cost control framework, which will be imposed on private businesses.
So just because I have very limited time, would you be able to submit the names that you lobbied to committee for those four?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. My next question is for Dr. Mathieu. Is it Mathieu? Is that right, or Matthew?
Mathieu.
Mathieu. Okay, I'm trying to be French. I'm practicing.
That's fine.
But
no worries.
I'm glad I got it right. But so we know across Canada, a lot of concern, even in this committee, is about labor shortages in the sector as one of the major barriers for expanding childcare services to meet the demand. But we also know that low wages, precarious work, and lack of benefits in the sector makes it difficult to recruit and retrain qualified staff. And I would say research also points, in terms of work conditions for workers, research also points that for-profit childcare, not all, but have a record of not respecting livable wages and certainly good work standards for workers. What are some examples of programs or policies that the federal government could pursue in collaboration with provinces to address some of these workforce issues and shortages? Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna answer drawing on Quebec's experience. In Quebec, we have had work study programs that were recently set up by the government. So you can go to Cégep, so college, and while you do your study to become an early childcare worker, you are also paid to work. And after each semester, you get you can get scholarship. You can also be working and have some of your experience recognized. In Quebec, we've also had a program in 2020 to recruit 10,000, I'm sorry, I don't know the word in English, préposés aux bénéficiaires, to recruit people working in long-term care facilities. And the program has worked, although many people, not quite 10,000 people remained in their job after the program, but there was an initiative by the government to really push to have more people being interested in that profession. So these are some of the initiatives: work study, and then it's really about political will, I would say.
I would agree with you, and the NDP's been really pushing hard for livable wages and certainly benefits for workers. And I mention it often because I'm so proud. As a former early childhood educator, I might have stayed in the field, not pursued a teaching degree, ended up at the university, but I enjoyed it so much. But I wasn't willing to live in poverty, so I left the field as a young woman. My last question is for you, Monsieur Fortin. I know that you've done tremendous work in the field, and I want to commend you for all your research and efforts. Excuse me. Your submission to the committee states that research literature unanimously concludes that quality of childcare is the highest in not-profit CPEs. You also mention it again today, and it's the lowest in private for-profit centres. I'd like you to expand on this briefly and maybe suggest ways in which you believe this legislation could be strengthened to better safeguard affordable, accessible, universal, and high-quality childcare. Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
40 seconds, Mr. Fortin.
Mr. Fortin? Look, let me say that I would suggest that an indicator that we should pay special attention to is the pay provided to early childhood educator. There's a report that comes out monthly about pay scales across Canada, that's Statistics Canada, that compares various levels of educators. Quebec does a bit better than the Canadian average, but not that much better. So for all provinces, we have a lot of work to do to train and to pay, to remunerate early childhood educators. Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
And our time is now over. So with that, is it the pleasure of the committee to adjourn? Before we do, I want to thank the witness for appearing. I did give you a lot of latitude on the timelines, especially to Mr. Fortin and Madame Churcher, because it was important to get both sides adequate discussion in the committee. So with that, thank you for participating. Committee is adjourned. Adjourned.